VAR controversy, which has dominated the discussions over the last 2 days. Look, the fact is that I think that the first decision was probably right, but it took too long. The second decision was probably wrong, but it took only a matter of seconds to clear it.
How is he not interfering with Gyokeres? If we're looking for sort of common sense, you don't always get consistency, but back-to-back decisions in a semi-final first leg of a cup where they're that similar, I don't see how one's not given and the other one is. This is just two almost exact same things, and yet we've got different outcomes off it.
The first check on Tuesday night was far too long. Did he need to wait 5 minutes and then send the referee to the monitor? Not sure. Felt too long, felt too convoluted, sucked the air out of the game for me. But the Chelsea one, maybe too fast and not looked at with the right sort of meticulous eye. Well, Crookie has been, as he's just told us, out of the loop for 24 hours because after helping to break the Michael Carrick story, a little story we did together over the course of the last 5 days, he was so drained, so physically drained, that he had to go for a day's racing at Newbury and get suitably battered. How are you? Okay?
I'm good. You know what? That was the first day I've had off since Christmas Day, so it was nice to switch off. And I still did a breakfast hit before I went. Still the company.
Let's get the tiny little violins out. Come on. Oh, he's only had 1 day off. Yeah. Scotty, you okay?
I'm good, mate. I mean, how many millions has he earned already in 2026? That's the question.
That is the question. Yes, it is.
And that's not just working. That's on the track as well, on the racing track.
It's a shame, actually, that you aren't all over the VAR controversy, which has dominated the discussions over the last 2 days. The first one at St James's Park on Tuesday night, when Erling Haaland is adjudged to have been holding Malik Chow and stopping him from playing the ball as Antoine Semenyo looked to score his second goal of the game. And then last night in the Chelsea match against Arsenal, Victor Gyokeres standing on the goal line with Martin Guiu in a similar sort of circumstance. But the goal this time wasn't disallowed. Actually, it was interesting to hear Jared Gillett on VAR apparently said, "I'm deciding he isn't impacting anybody's ability to play the ball. Goal, move on." Decisive, decided to swipe it across and just get on with the game. Now, some people will like that because of the 5.5 minute delay we had on Tuesday night. But I'm sure that a lot of Chelsea fans will not like it, Scott, especially maybe Robert Sanchez. What was your verdict?
Yeah, I mean, look, first of all, it was really a poor goal to concede. And when you're without some of your real big guns up against Arsenal, you can't afford to give away sloppy goals. Big mistake from Rob Sanchez. Joao Pedro's not picking up properly, although he's a forward. I don't know why he was almost there in the first place. Andre Santos is dancing in one of the Arsenal players and not even looking at the ball. But he's outside the goal. And then you got Mark Guiu as well and Gyokeres. Look, I people who call for consistency, if we're looking for sort of common sense, you don't always get consistency, but back-to-back decisions in a semi-final first leg of a cup where they're that similar, I don't see how one's not given and the other one is. And I don't not understand the argument as well that if Gyokeres wasn't there, then Mark Guiu would have been looking at the ball and would have been in a position to be able to defend it. So how is he not interfering with Guiu? Not good defending from him. But I just think, for me, it's just... I'm fascinated to hear what Webb will say about this, because this is just two almost exact same things, and yet we've got different outcomes off it.
Yeah, I think we're a victim here of two things. One, the first check on Tuesday night was far too long, right? Semi-automated offside technology failed. No one knew about that because we weren't told. I had contact with the VAR during that sort of first 60 minutes of the game, and then when that incident happened, I couldn't hear what they were saying to one another, so I couldn't transmit what was being said because it wasn't clear to us either. So there was a few technological problems that befell the VAR check, I think, on Tuesday night, but it did take too long. I thought it was pretty clear right from the very off that he was offside. I thought that when you look back at the whole process, once you see he's offside, it's obvious, bearing in mind your previous decisions and consistency, as you've already spoken, if you look back over the season, that would be classed as interfering with play. Did he need to wait 5 minutes and then send the referee to the monitor? Not sure. Felt too long, felt too convoluted, sucked the air out of the game for me. But the Chelsea one, maybe too fast and not looked at with the right sort of meticulous eye. I think Jared Gillett's probably reacting to what happened the night before and thinking, well, I don't think that goal should have been chalked off, so I'm going to let this one go. But he didn't ask Simon Hooper to go to the monitor, and I wonder if even if he had asked him to do that, we would have had the same situation or a different one. I don't know. Look, the fact is that I think that the first decision was probably right, but it took too long. The second decision was probably wrong, but it took only a matter of seconds to clear it. So look, we're in that sort of zone, aren't we, that probably they need to just sharpen up a little bit on that. I don't think it can excuse the absolutely rank bad defending that befell Chelsea from the first corner. My intro to that incident, Alex, was I hope Chelsea can defend corners better than Portsmouth did. And my answer, as it went in, was they didn't. And it was, as Scott said, appalling from both, not the goalkeeper, but just both the goalkeeper and the rest of the defenders as well. But what about the other goal that he conceded?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've said Robert Sanchez has been a problem for a while now in terms of Chelsea really getting into the top four regularly and competing for major silverware. But yeah, he certainly hasn't covered himself in glory. I'm surprised that a new goalkeeper is not top of their list, but then Ben Roberts, the man who signed Robert Sanchez from Brighton, has just got another promotion, hasn't he? So I think Robert Sanchez's position is fairly bomb-proof. I was just going to make the point, when it comes to set pieces, do you think now opposition teams know that Arsenal is so good with free kicks and corners in particular, that psychologically it's forcing them to make defensive errors? Because, you know, Portsmouth at the weekend, they weren't beaten by 4 world-class goals. They basically beat themselves with the defending. It was the same with Chelsea last night. And I just wonder, Scott, you'd have been there when you know this is a real strength for the opponent. Does it fry the brain a little bit? Because that's what seemed to happen for that first Arsenal goal.
It shouldn't do. I mean, you should still be able to just defend against any particular corner that comes in, but it can do. Of course it can. And it's all about the quality. It's all about the quality of the ball. And then actually, can you sort of surround the goalkeeper in a way that he feels totally uncomfortable with it? And that was, I mean, Rob Sanchez, he's 6'6". I've stood next to him and felt like an absolute dwarf. You know, he should be able to read that ball coming in and then at least get a flap on it and get a touch on it. And he didn't get anything at all. So, look, I think it's something that Chelsea need to sort out for sure. But then, of course, Chelsea scored down the other end and, you know, off set pieces as well. You cannot. I remember speaking to Keith Andrews about this at the start of the season. And he was almost like, I'm a little bit annoyed it's back in fashion now because I was going to go with this and this is what I wanted to do. And you can see that everyone's kind of doing it now. It has always been, especially when the games are tight. I don't think Arsenal were brilliant with the ball. I think they were brilliant without it and didn't let Chelsea come out at all. The pressing was fantastic. But when they're that good with the ball, that good without the ball, and then the set pieces as well, you're coming up against such a well-oiled machine. You just cannot afford to give away goals like that, especially when your big boys are out.
I think what's really interesting is that there was points in that game that Chelsea looked as if they were going to be out the tie, blown away by Arsenal. There was a 2-0 victory at one stage on the cards, then it was 3-1, so they had a good cushion, Arsenal, but Chelsea kept reeling them back. It gives them a shot in the dark when they go to the Emirates, but Arsenal still massive favourites. Should Liam Rossigna be criticised for the way he started the game with his team selection? Because it was pretty evident that Marc Guiu wasn't able to do what was required for Chelsea. Would they not have been better playing João Pedro up there from the start, Neto as the number 10 and Garnacho on the left, as they did 6 minutes into the second half once they went 2-0 down, rather than starting with the youngster up front?
Yeah, and obviously Ampong as well started at right back. You know, that set alarm bells for me because he's just not excelled in that position. So yeah, I think maybe he was too clever. And then you look at the Arsenal team, it's pretty much full strength, isn't it? Probably, you know, without the goalkeeper and Ben White taken into account. So when I saw the lineups, I did fear the worst for Chelsea. I actually thought they might suffer a heavier defeat than they did. So as you say, the 2 goals from Garnacho, who seemed to have a point to prove. He obviously wants to start more regularly, does just about keep the tie alive. But listen, he's going to tinker because Chelsea managers are told they have to rotate the squad. So it's not going to be any different under Rossigna than it was under Maresca.
That was the big question that we had. Was it Liam Rosenior actually tinkering with tactics here, or was he being informed that there were certain players that couldn't play? We know that Liam Delap was ill, that Jamie Gittins was ill, that there was an injury for Reece James that happened in training. He got a bang on the hip. Cole Palmer should be fit, so should James, for Saturday's game against Brentford. But ultimately, Scott, they did start with an even weakened team than maybe they needed to. And this is a big semi-final game. I didn't really see in Mark Guiu, or have evidence of seeing in Mark Guiu over his spell at Chelsea, that he was the right man to lead the line against Arsenal.
Yeah, but then, you'll get Crookie complaining about Garnacho and that he isn't good enough and hasn't done it. And then what have you got coming off the bench there? Because we know that Arsenal got such a strong bench. He's going to have to make substitutions at some point. No, I don't agree. I think it's a bit of a hindsight thing, to be honest with you. I think Mark Guiu, the bottom line is, Sam, I don't think the Chelsea forwards are good enough. I mean, Liam Delap, even if he was fit, it was a £30 million no-brainer. He's not a Premier League sort of winner at the moment. Mark Guiu is still a youngster coming through. João Pedro, he's probably not even a number 9, he's a number 10. You used to make fun of me about Nicholas Jackson. I take him back all day long right now. That's still a problem, even though they have spent money. The goalkeeper's still a problem. Centre half, that lack of senior pro. And then centre forward, the person who can score goals. Yes, as a team, they've kind of scored goals and have actually done okay with set pieces. But you still need that kind of out and out someone who, he may miss chances, but he's going to score goals as well. So no, I don't criticise Liam for the team selection that he did. They were under pressure against arguably Europe's best team. And so he made changes, and I thought it did really well. And Garnacho came off the bench and obviously made a big impact.
I thought they were much better in the second half, and I disagree about Achampong, by the way. We were baffled as to why he was taken off, because he was playing so well at right back. He was getting up on that right-hand side, carrying the ball brilliantly, cutting in, feeding it into Esteval. Esteval was terrific, especially second half, a real threat at the end of the game, showing that even though he's only 18 years of age, he's got a fearlessness and an ability to be able to unsettle even the best of defences. What was your thoughts, Scotty, on Gyokeres' performance? Because people were telling me it was his best performance in an Arsenal shirt. I mean, you can't just be thinking that because he tapped in the ball from 1 yard. There must have been other things that you saw. Danny Murphy was heavily critical of him.
Yeah, I wouldn't be overly critical of him, but I wouldn't say, I mean, if that's his best performance in an Arsenal shirt, then he's still got a long way to go. Look, he hasn't sort of hit the ground running, has he, for Arsenal? He works hard. He will never give up. He'll press from the front, but he's not that kind of yet that number 9 that we were thinking that Arsenal need to take them over the line. But he is a really good addition to have, especially with the likes of Havertz out and Gabriel Jesus, who was out for a long time. He can do a job. Moreno has come in and done a very good job, but he's not been the standout number 9 that Arsenal were hoping for. But the bottom line is, look where they are. They're absolutely nailing it in every single competition. So far, so good.
They are always finding ways to win, which is, I suppose, the hallmark of a team that are going to have a successful season. That's it for the Carabao Cup. Let's look ahead to the big game of the weekend. Live and exclusive to National Radio, it's talkSPORT's 250th commentary of the year. It's the Manchester Derby. Manchester United against Manchester City. Baptism of fire for Michael Carrick, the new interim manager, who has been unveiled to the public. He is going to be in charge until the end of the season. Steve Haaland, part of his coaching staff, Jonathan Woodgate and Johnny Evans there, as well as Travis Binion. So, Crook, you've had a couple of days now just to digest the news and think about what could happen next. What's your view on everything?
It's mixed, to be honest. Listen, I wish Michael Carrick all the best. I think he is obviously a club legend as a player. He did well enough in his interim spell in charge, 2 wins and a draw from 3 games when he replaced Ollie in the first place. And obviously what he did at Middlesbrough, I think gets overlooked at times, that they were 21st in the table when he took over. He led them to 4th that season. They made the playoffs. Yes, the league positions went backwards on the face of it after that, but you have to factor in that he was selling a lot of his best players, particularly when they finished 10th. They lost Latte Lath in the January transfer window, and that was basically their main source of goals. So good luck to him. I think he'll need it because the squad is disjointed. There's a lot of issues behind the scenes. I think there's quite a few disillusioned players in that dressing room that he's going to have to pick up, not least Bruno Fernandes, who I do think probably will leave at the end of the season. I think he will find a club in Europe willing to activate that release clause and go and join one of the big guns from the continent who are capable of challenging for trophies. Should a club of the size and stature of Manchester United have sacked their manager seemingly without a plan and are now on to their second interim boss of the season, the answer is obviously no. And I do think they'd have been better served leaving Ruben Amorim in situ until they had a definitive plan. I think maybe they'd still be in the FA Cup if they did that. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to Darren Fletcher, but the 2 games that he managed, they dropped points away at Burnley in a game where they had 30 shots and they've been knocked out of the FA Cup. So you have to say again, Ineos have made a poor judgment, a poor decision. So I'm not particularly optimistic about the final 17 games of the season. And he's got a really tough introduction, hasn't he, Michael Carrick, with the Manchester derby. City only scored 10 last weekend and looked really good at Newcastle in midweek. And then Arsenal away in his second game in charge. So, yeah, he's going to need a bit of fortune.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because some people will say, Scott, does any of it really matter, bearing in mind that we're in a situation where they're out of both cups and they're sort of outside the top 5? The truth is actually they're only 1 point behind Brentford, who are 5th, and they're in 7th at the moment. And they're still within touching distance of the top 4. And the job has to be to try and target getting into the Champions League. That has to be their silverware, doesn't it, this season?
100%. I mean, to be fair to Crookie at the start of the season, you know, he predicted Manchester United to finish 5th, didn't he?
Yeah,
he did.
I mean, I said, I mentioned to you, and we were talking about, I was working on the Brighton game. I said, look, that 5th place is so much up for grabs. I do feel, though, with the Aston Villa and the season that they've had, I think Liverpool, even though they're a million miles from where they were last season, I credit to Arne Slot because he's finding a way to win games. That's all they have to do.
The top 4 is cemented, isn't it? The top 4 is not going to change.
And I do feel that Chelsea have the squad to finish 5th as well. I can see that wry smile on your face there, Sam. And obviously we'll see how that goes. But that's the aim. That's the aim for Mickey Carrick. And as much as, and I said it last week on the pod, and Crookie said it, how can Manchester United, one of the, if not the biggest club in the world, sack the manager and not know what they're going to do? It's almost like a little kid having a tantrum, throwing the toys out the pram and saying, right, what do I do now? Where's my next toy? I mean, it's ridiculous. But I do think Mickey Carrick will bring a sense of calmness in the way that he did on the pitch as a player. And I think in the press conferences as well, I mean, there's already pressure being a Manchester United player, but there won't be any extra headlines coming out the back of what, say, a Ruben Amorim press conference was. So I think he will bring a real sense of calmness. And I think it's a great job opportunity for him, isn't it? Not for Manchester United, but to try and be a Premier League manager next season somewhere else.
Yes, and I think that's a great opportunity for Michael Carrick. And I think sometimes we sort of, get a little bit skiffy ourselves about the fact that we've got young British managers that are given great opportunities. Liam Rosenior is in charge of Chelsea. Michael Carrick is in charge of Manchester United. 2 English managers in charge of 2 of the biggest clubs in the country. That's an absolutely massive positive for British coaching. And I think we should sort of be happy about that in some way, shape or form. Actually, my wry smile wasn't about Chelsea getting into the top 5. I think that's what they should be aiming at too. My wry smile was the fact that Crook has told us that now the top 4 is cemented after he'd already told us that Liverpool had won the title, then Arsenal won the title, then Manchester City had won the title, then Arsenal won the title again, and Liverpool have only got 35 points, Brentford have got 33, Newcastle 32, and Manchester United 32 as well. So, look, it's very tight for that 4th place. What does the future hold for Ineos and Manchester United? Because there's some financial concerns doing the rounds, Crook. And obviously, if they don't get in the Champions League next season, then that's going to impact them even further. Any sort of restructure, they need a serious restructuring. They need more players coming into the group. They can't keep being in a situation where they can't spend.
Yeah, although I don't think it's going to happen in this window. I know that the brief from the club is that if we identify players in this window that are good for the long term, then we'll sign them. But as I've said before, by hiring an interim manager, they've almost given themselves a free pass to skip this window. Not for the first time under the Glazer regime. We have to remember, for all the flack that Ineos and their cohorts get, the Glazers are still running the football club. I think they're going to be in town actually for this game at the weekend, which is interesting. So I don't think they're going to be active. They've obviously got players coming back into the squad now. Ahmad and Brian and Bumo are back at training after being knocked out of the AFCON, so they'll be available for the derby. So the squad does look a little bit stronger than it has in recent weeks. But the glaring omission is a Michael Carrick type player in midfield, and it has been since he left the football club as a player. So I don't think he'd dig his boots out and get himself fit for the Manchester derby. But I'll tell you what, it'll be a lot more mobile than Manuel Ugarte.
Do you think that the whole sort of Premier League communications staff got together at the beginning of January and wrote the same brief? We will go after targets in this window if there is a long-term opportunity and it arises. Every club say the same thing, right? I mean, Conor Gallagher was only signed by Tottenham because Bentancur got injured. They weren't going to do any business.
No.
And then they felt, oh, we need to pull the trigger on this because we're a little bit light in midfield. In fact, it was Thomas Frank, I think, that urged them to get him an extra midfield player. I mean, a lot of Premier League clubs are just pulling back the spending a little bit, which is quite interesting. I think that's because of the fact that players have become so very expensive that you can't afford to make a mistake anymore because you're lumbered with a contract for 3 or 4 years. And if you get the wrong player in, then you cause yourself all sorts of problems. So they want that time to do the due diligence during the summer window. What do you make about this obsession with Sir Alex Ferguson being around the place? A lot of people talking about the fact that, people are ringing him up to ask him if they can take the job and people suggesting that he's around too much and has too much influence. Is that just sort of chatter or is that a real thing? What's our view?
Well, I think Roy Keane was out of order with his wording, to describe the greatest manager probably in the history of English football as hanging around like a bad smell. I thought lacked a bit of class from Keano, and obviously that goes back to the feud that's been going on for a number of years now. But I do take the point that maybe Fergie's influence is too big. I don't think it's helpful. When you get Ole Gunnar Solskjaer coming in as manager and saying, well, I can't park in that parking space because it's the bosses. You've got Darren Fletcher saying, well, I needed his blessing. You don't really. And I think it's going to take a very strong character to emerge from that shadow. We saw it with Sir Matt Busby, hanging around the club and looming over managers. And really, it was only when Fergie came in that there was a boss who was willing to or able to work under that type of scrutiny. And he's there week in, week out. He's certainly at every home game. He travels a lot to away games. He's earned the right to go and enjoy his football. And obviously, he lost his wife recently, and maybe it's a bit of an escape. But I think if the hierarchy there is still leaning on him to help with the big decisions, I think that's wrong. I think they've got to start shaping their own future and therefore escape some of the past.
The big decision, of course, is who takes over during the summer. Do you think, Scott, that Michael Carrick is a candidate for that, or is this very much an interim position? And then when you look around the landscape of who could take the job, who are the elite managers that would be willing to work in the Ineos system, do you think?
Well, I mean, that's almost a contradiction in terms, isn't it? Elite managers working under the Ineos system. Look, I remember being in the studio with you a good few months ago, and I mentioned about Thomas Tuchel. And I can see you shaking your head, and it's not going to happen, and maybe it's not, but he's an elite manager who obviously we don't know what's going to happen with the World Cup. Mauricio Pochettino is a manager that I wanted to see longer as Chelsea manager. Carlo Ancelotti, obviously, all of those will be at the World Cup. We don't know what's going to happen post that. There's not many. There's not many, Sam. And in terms of under the, we can talk about Manchester United, but also Chelsea, and then there's other owners who work in a similar way that perhaps just go under a little bit of the radar. It's not as if they want full control. I was on with Danny Kelly and Charlie Baker yesterday, and Danny said, yeah, the days of, the manager doing absolutely everything are long gone. I said, but it doesn't have to be an either or. It doesn't have to be one end of the spectrum to this end of the spectrum. It can be somewhere in the middle where the head coach is still really important and he's not being told by the medical staff, you have to take this player off after 60 minutes. And that manager then gets shouted at, you don't know what you're doing. There has to be a more influence from the head coach. But, of course, the up above and the structure needs to be absolutely right because the head coach can come and go at any given time. But I go back to Brighton and, you and Quickie, what you talk about, Tony Bloom and the way they know what they're doing a year ahead. They're ahead of the game. And this is a Manchester United group right now that look like they're just going from day to day to day.
The problem we've got is there's so much money in football now, right? So the people that own the clubs are so rich and they're so used to having their own way and calling the shots that a lot of them actually are very much involved in the operation. Tony Bloom, Matthew Benham, two examples of probably what we would consider to be the better run clubs are very, very hands-on on what happens at those football clubs. If you go across the whole spectrum now, there's a lot of owners with big egos that want to say on how things happen day to day, but also what happens on the football pitch. They want to make sure that their assets are protected. They want to make sure that they play in a certain way. They want to be able to change it if they don't like it. And that comes with instability. So you are at the whim of a lot of one-man bands. At the top of Aston Villa, you've got two big characters, but they very much have a day-to-day influence on what happens at that football club. Okay, Unai Emery is given the control, but they have the vision, they have the drive. They're the ones that set the agenda. You've got Arsenal, obviously, is run by Josh Kroenke now, but Dad's very much involved. However, they've stepped back and allowed control to go to Mikel Arteta. And because he's been allowed to do his job, he's managed to formulate a team and a cohesive structure that has helped his team going forward. We know that Pep has a lot of freedom. But again, that ownership model is not perfect. There's not many clubs that you can walk around and go, that's the perfect structure. I'd like to work in that. And I wonder whether or not that puts off quite a lot of head coaches, from like experienced ones, from getting involved.
Yeah, I think so. And it's something we've debated a lot, the role of the sporting director. But I mean, Manchester United is such an interesting case study. Actually, it was one of our colleagues on The Athletic who recently said that, Chelsea and United fall over themselves to compete for the title of biggest basket case club in the Premier League. And yeah, I get his point. Certainly, they're the two that give us the most talking points. But ultimately, the problem here was not Ruben Amorim. It wasn't Erik ten Hag. It wasn't Louis van Gaal. It wasn't Jose Mourinho. The problem is the ownership structure at Manchester United, and it's Ineos who are bearing the brunt of that. But as I've mentioned already, the Glazers still have overall control. They're not that interested in sporting success as long as the coffers keep coming in, and they always will, because the stadium is full every week. The megastore, they're queuing out the block. They're still a global superpower, Manchester United. So ultimately, whoever is in charge is going to have his hands tied, because they're not interested in attracting the superstars. And it's becoming harder, because if you're Anton Semenyo and you've got a choice to join Manchester City or Manchester United, as he did, unfortunately, 9 times out of 10, you're going to pick City.
I'm really pleased you're coming round to my way of thinking, because I think we had a big, heated discussion about exactly this on this podcast about 8 to 10 weeks ago, when I explained to you, I was going on about the fact that everything's always scrutinised about the manager and the players and also, but actually it's the ownership structure. And the Glazers, by the way, are guilty as well, and Ineos, of not managing this club properly for a very long time.
I know United and Chelsea are seen as basket cases, but at least the Chelsea multi-billionaires know what they're doing. They have a plan, whether you agree with it or whether you don't. They know what they want to do, and I think they should be a little bit more transparent to the fans. Is it about just selling players and on a short and long term, and if trophies come along the way, then so be it, and not so much trophies ASAP. But they know what they're doing. There is a clear plan there. With Manchester United, there's no obvious plan. It looks like they're just fumbling around in the dark.
They will need an obvious plan at the weekend when they take on Manchester City, who were impressive in midweek against Newcastle United. Antoine Semenyo, as you've already mentioned, brilliant signing, and he's hit the ground running. 2 goals in 2 starts for his new club. Difficult to contain. If he plays on the right-hand side again this week, Crook, Patrick Dorgu versus Semenyo, who wins that battle?
Well, would it be Patrick Dorgu? It'd be Luke Shaw, wouldn't it? In part of a back four.
I don't know.
With Dorgu on the bench. I mean, yeah, it's a frightening prospect, because Antoine Semenyo has settled easily, hasn't he, into life as a Manchester City player. A goal and assist at the weekend, a goal and another chalked off in midweek. So no danger of him taking time to find his feet at a big club in the Premier League. And I think the United team selection will be fascinating, because we think it will be a back four, and I think it will be Shaw and Dalot as the fullbacks. I would imagine Harry Maguire will come back in now that he's fit, because Lenny Yoro has been struggling in recent weeks for his performances. But what does he do going forward, Michael Carrick? Because he's almost got too many players to shoehorn in. You've got Mason Mount, you've got Benjamin Šeško, you've got Matheus Cunha, who I thought was poor last weekend and might well find himself on the bench, but he is a big game player. We saw that at Anfield. But obviously you've got Brian Mbeumo coming back into the team as well. You've got Ahmad. That's 5 players in a 4-2-3-1 formation. A couple of those are going to have to be left out, aren't they?
Yeah, well, look, Mbeumo and Ahmad, we don't know the prognosis of whether or not they're 100% fit or what the situation is with them after coming back from AFCON. I know you were a little bit annoyed that Mbeumo didn't come back quicker because they were out on, I think, Friday night, weren't they? And then Manchester United played on the Sunday, and you thought that maybe he could have rushed back and been there a little bit quicker. Crook and I were once at Fratton Park. Yakubu, who was coming back from international duty at the AFCON with Nigeria, had been knocked out, I think, the day before, so in the afternoon of the day before. And he flew back overnight to get back to play in a game on a Sunday for Portsmouth. And he was registered as a substitute when the team sheet went in, despite not being at the ground, and then travelled down the touchline with his boots in his hand midway through the first half to go and sit on the bench. Absolutely terrific, by the way. He ran down the touchline, into the tunnel, got changed, came back out, sat on the bench, and then played second half. Fantastic. Great story.
Can I just ask a question? Which one of those two, if Crookie played for his country and then had to come back quickly, do you think he would have done? Walk straight back, boots in hand, or do you think he might have had a little night out?
He might have been the Ryan Aitnori, missed my connection. Ryan Cherky, brilliant goal in midweek, played really well. He's done fantastic for Manchester City. He'd be a real threat, actually. Is there any concern, Scott, about Erling Haaland? 1 goal from open play in 6 games. Hardly touched the ball on Tuesday night.
Yeah, he's rubbish, isn't he?
No one said he was rubbish. Just, if you know, new players, getting used to them, different circumstances.
Massive concern for the opposition, because at some point he's going to hit a hat-trick. Whether it's going to be this one, I'm not quite sure. I mean, United, even though for years now they've been the more inferior side, have found ways, you can say against Liverpool as well, to get great results. So trying to avoid the sort of cliche, you know, the form goes out the window, but actually the top players can lift themselves for these particular games. And I think it's going to be interesting. But look, City are the much better side. You know, Ryan Cherky is playing fantastic. Semenyo settled in really well. You know, there's Phil Foden. Obviously, there's a problem in defence, but they didn't look like there was a problem in defence at St James's Park. And Erling Haaland, we know, is one of the top 3 strikers in world football, and will smash records wherever he goes, and will beat Alan Shearer's record if he stays long enough. And he doesn't even have to stay as long as Alan Shearer did. So, no, not a problem at all. Top-class striker. He'll be on the score sheet very, very soon.
Okay, predictions then. Crook, what's your scoreline for Saturday lunchtime live on talkSPORT?
I think the best United can hope for is a draw with the atmosphere whipped up by Michael Carrick's return as interim manager. The fact that City defensively don't look great, and you look at their back four, it's by no means first choice because of the injuries. And obviously they've got Ahmad and Mbeumo coming back into the team. So I'm gonna optimistically predict that it'll finish 2-2.
Scott?
So he's not hiding behind the sofa for this particular one, but I'm going to go 2-1 City. They've got, we've said this before though, but they have got far too much class for United.
Yeah, I think it might be an absolute humdinger. I'm going to go for 3-2 Manchester City, because I think it will be sort of like, as Crook says, full of atmosphere. There'll be a lot of people trying to prove a point. You've got those wide attacking players coming back. Manchester United do score goals. City do leak them and score them, so it could be a bit of a shootout. We look forward to it. It's live on talkSPORT 12:30 this Saturday lunchtime. Right, what about the rest of the weekend's action? Nottingham Forest against Arsenal is a 5:30 kickoff. Arsenal's lead could be cut to 3 by the time this one gets underway. And they'll fancy themselves against a horribly out of sorts Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I mean, look, I remember watching the Forest game against Manchester City, and I thought, do you know what? They're going to be fine. They won't have a problem, because I thought their performance was absolutely spot on. But again, the difference between a good player and a top player is they can put in that type of performance week in, week out, the inconsistency. They were lucky against West Ham. I mean, I cannot begin to explain how big a result that was. And it doesn't matter about whether you're good or whether you're not in a one-off game. And that was almost a bit like a final. I think we'll look back at that game as being pivotal. The fact that West Ham not only weren't able to win it, so there's 1 point in the gap, actually ended up being 7 points. But Forest aren't in a good place right now. They're not playing well at all. They're lacking in confidence big time. And that Manchester City game, I'm like, no, you're playing a million miles away. Plus with the Europa League coming up as well. Do they want to try and get into the automatic spots? Of course they want to. They're only 2 points off at the moment, but they're too difficult, or certainly Braga away is a difficult game, sandwiched in between the Arsenal and the Brentford game as well. So he's got some massive choices to make here, Sean Dyche, for sure.
Yeah, 4 defeats in 5 Premier League games now for Nottingham Forest, and the goals are a real problem for them, aren't they? I mean, Igor Jesus at the top end of the formation started to look a little bit more physical, holds the ball up a little bit better, but still doesn't look the goal threat that they require. Hence why they've been looking around in the transfer market for a big, tall striker that they can try and rely on, who can score goals. They're not, falling off trees, are they? That's for sure. And Chris Wood's going to be out for some time yet. Talking of strikers, Gyokeres getting his goal in midweek. We spoke about him briefly, but they do have lots of options now in that area with Jesus, Havertz, even Marino as well. What should the pecking order of those strikers be, Crook?
Well, I always thought that when Kai Havertz was fully fit, he would come back in and lead the line. I think particularly actually in those big Champions League games when we get to the knockout stages. But it does seem like they want to give Gyokeres the opportunity to play his way into form, to start justifying that price tag. And obviously he's come up with a big goal in a League Cup semi-final, which will do his confidence the world of good. I think he'll keep his place against a Forest team who are unusually leaky for a Sean Dyche side this weekend. Gabriel Jesus, I think they still see as more of an impact player off the bench. So I think it will be a shootout between Gyokeres and Havertz when he's fit. Marino has done a good job as a false number 9, but obviously it's not really his best position. But you're dead right about Forest and that lack of goal threat. I think Igor Jesus is someone who looks good in the cup competitions, particularly in Europe, but is struggling really to translate that into the Premier League. And I'm surprised they've not yet pushed the button on Jurgen Strand-Larsen, because they are one of the clubs who are looking at him. Maybe they feel that the price tag will go down the nearer we get to the end of the window. But it's a gamble, isn't it? Because if West Ham did suddenly find a run of results, and they obviously got a much-needed victory against QPR last week, then all of a sudden Forest, if they don't pick up points, could be dragged into trouble. This would have been a difficult game for Arsenal in previous seasons. I see it as a tap-in this time round. I think they're going to win, and I think they'll probably win these.
Well, they have gone there and struggled, actually, in the FA Cup not so long ago. In fact, when Forest were getting promoted, they lost there to a late Lewis Graben goal, and they've had their tussles with Nottingham Forest previously. But as you say, the way that Arsenal are playing right now, they've got a command and a swagger about them that looks as if that they will secure all 3 points. Certainly, both Spurs and West Ham need 3 points at the weekend. What a huge game this is. These two meeting at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, two of the most under pressure and under scrutiny managers in the Premier League facing off. Who's under more pressure here, do you think, Scott? Thomas Frank or Nuno Espirito Santo?
I think it's 50-50. I think Thomas Frank is probably a little bit more, but not by much. Nuno's come in, and I like him. I've said this before, but he hasn't hit the ground running. He hasn't made the impact that we're expecting. I was working on the West Ham game for TV against QPR, and they absolutely fumbled their way through in extra time against a team you can argue is fighting for the playoffs, but actually is probably going to be mid-table, who had a lot of injuries and their star striker was out. He started with 3 at the back, didn't work, lots of possession. Mavropanos came off through an injury, and that was almost an enforced change, and it was better. But it's not good at West Ham, and but it's probably even worse at Spurs. Quickie can tell us exactly what sort of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. But I like Thomas Frank, and I want him to be given time. And I talked about United being a Titanic to turn around. In a way, Spurs is the London Titanic.
Well, it's recruitment, isn't it, that's been the problem for Tottenham Hotspur, and that recruitment has been sort of added to with Conor Gallagher arriving. It hasn't gone down particularly well amongst some of the Chelsea fans that I know. They were annoyed when he was sold in the first place, but now he's popped up at Tottenham. I didn't really get the whole sort of posing with a kit and the dog. I didn't get that bit, but, he seems pretty happy about being able to play. And he says he wants to go to Tottenham because he thinks he'll get more minutes, Crook. So Where does he slot into that team?
I think he goes in as one of their best midfielders. He's not a world beater, Connor, by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly improves Tottenham's options. I sort of understand it because at Villa, obviously, it's a lot more competitive in that area. I know you're a massive fan in particular of Boubacar Kamara. They've got Onana, they've got John McGinn, they've got Tielemans. So, yeah, the whole reason he's come back, Connor, is because he wants to force his way into the World Cup squad. He feels he has a better chance of doing that if he is playing week in, week out in the Premier League. And I think he'll get that opportunity at Spurs. And I think he will give them a little bit of a lift. But they need more. The young Brazilian Sousa is coming in at left back, but he's only 19 years of age. So he's one for the future as opposed to here and now. Dominic Solanke obviously made a cameo off the bench against Villa in the FA Cup. If they can keep him fit, it's a cliche, but he'll be like a new signing. But I still think, as I say, they're going to have to delve into the transfer market a little bit more. And this is a tricky game, isn't it? Given the rivalry between the two teams, given how desperate West Ham are for the points for their own different reasons, I'm not sure Thomas Frank can afford a defeat against West Ham. He's already on a sticky wicket with the fan base anyway, and this would be another big low if they were to be beaten in this game.
Well, especially seeing as they didn't turn up in the North London derby, they didn't turn up against Chelsea. The idea of losing at home to West Ham, or not beating West Ham, actually, I think won't go down very well at all. I like Connor. I think Connor's a brilliant player, by the way, at doing certain things. He's a great harasser, brilliant, tenacious midfield player, goes round, gets stuck in, wins the ball back, gives it to somebody else. If you're expecting to be a game changer, I don't think you're going to get that. Very similar a bit, though, Scott, to what they've got in Palhinha. So does that mean that now he's going to play instead of Palhinha or with Palhinha? How's that going to work? Because that's quite a sort of tenacious-looking midfield, but not necessarily a creative one.
No, but in a 4-2-3-1, that can definitely work if you've got the creativity there. I agree. Spurs need that, or at least their creative players to come back. But I think it's a really good signing for Spurs at a moment where, especially at home, things can get a little bit toxic, and you need brave warriors in there. He is absolutely one of those.
Yeah.
And he hasn't been scarred by in any way of a lack of confidence of what's happened this season already. He will come in training, let alone matches, and just lift everybody. And this is exactly what the fans want to see. Even if their team's not playing well, they want to see their players running around. And he's the perfect one with those blonde locks running behind him, the way he does, and he gets stuck in. He can turn a crowd in the way that even Palhinha can't. So I think he's a really good signing for Spurs.
What about West Ham? Paqueta pulling a bit of an Isak. What's happening there?
Well, it's interesting because I think his camp were briefing when I was at the races on Wednesday that he had a back injury. He's been at the training ground, but the reason he's not training is because he's not fully fit. West Ham sources have pushed back on that. They say he isn't injured and he is trying to force a move away. We know there's been one bid rejected from Flamengo in Brazil. That's where he wants to go. He wants to go back to his homeland. There's been talk of Tottenham. That's been completely dismissed out of hand to me. So it's a problem, isn't it? Because Nuno wants him to stay. He feels like he can be a match winner. A lot of West Ham fans actually are not bothered because they think he's been poor, not just this season, but going back to last season. And I think psychologically, he's never really recovered from those betting allegations. I think that's why he wants to go back home.
I was in a restaurant yesterday lunchtime, and a West Ham fan came over and he said to me, West Ham, it's an absolute mess. We're going to get thrashed by Tottenham at the weekend. That tells you everything. We're getting thrashed by Tottenham. He said, and that Paqueta, he goes, I don't care. As long as he doesn't go to Tottenham, I don't mind. He hasn't done anything for us for ages anyway. So I think underscoring what Crookie's saying, there's a very, very much, I mean, he was really agitated as well. He was getting really annoyed. And then when I came back later in the day, I saw him again. So I sort of walked past the place and he was going to me, I'm really worried about this weekend. There is a real panic. There's a real sort of low amongst West Ham fans this year. And we've talked about the apathy a lot, sort of rather than the anger. But I think if they were to lose again this weekend and that gap was to maybe widen, I mean, they probably won't widen because Nottingham Forest have got Arsenal, which is probably a good thing for them. Then, I don't know. I think that they would even get even more apathetic and only pockets of it really feeling as if it's sort of angry because people have accepted that the likelihood is, Scott, they're going to go down.
Yeah, and it's really sad because one thing West Ham fans are not is apathetic. They're incredibly passionate, but they're seeing what's happened to their club for the last 18 months, 2 years, winning a European trophy, qualifying in the Premier League for the Europa League. And then there's this. It's heartbreaking, really. It's heartbreaking when you think about the quality of the fans. and the size of the club. It's a massive
I
club.
thought you were going to say quality of the squad then, and
No,
I was going to pull
not
you up on
myself.
it because that is one thing that isn't apparent.
Yeah, and exactly, and I couldn't say that, and unfortunately, I stopped myself. So it's the quality of the fans and what they sort of really should be watching. So look, I think if you speak to both sets of fans, I think if you'd have seen a Spurs fan on the other table in that restaurant, he would have said exactly the same thing to you.
Do you know what though? It's so frustrating because even in the game against QPR, Mavropanos, Kilman, Todibo, they're the options at centre half that they've got. They're just not even good enough. They're just not. They're not. They haven't got the fight. They haven't got the desire. They don't get there. When there's danger inside the penalty area, they don't react quick enough. They don't get out fast enough to try and stop it. And if you can't rely on your central defenders, you can't rely on that defensive solidity. I know Diouf will come back from the AFCON eventually. You're going to be in massive trouble at the bottom of the table, especially when you haven't really got the weapons going forward. I know they've signed 2 strikers, Castellanos and Pablo, but they don't look like they're going to hit the ground running in a sort of Carlos Tevez Mascherano sense, do they? I mean, let's be completely clear.
I think they were quite good, those 2 strikers, albeit against QPR. I thought Pablo put himself around. I thought Castellanos took his goal like a proper number 9. Obviously, there's a big difference between playing championship opposition in the Cup and doing it in the Premier League. But I think if you're looking for reasons to be positive, if you're a West Ham fan, that they look okay. And Somerville was superb. And again, if they can keep him fit, he is a match winner, Somerville. So I think they do have weapons going forward. It's the other end of the pitch that would concern me. They need a centre-back and a proper, decent centre-back.
Well, we'll see about that when they come up against Premier League opposition. Chelsea against Brentford. Now, I don't know if we've got our YouTube gurus able to do this and just to put the collection of pictures up on the screen of Scott Minto and his 2 best mates, Keith Andrews and Liam Rossigna, who he worked with for a very long time. And when we asked him, did you work with them together? He said no. They went, oh, hold on a second, look through my Instagram and realised that I'd done loads and loads of shows with them. So we've seen lots of pictures of you 3 together.
Three pictures you saw, Sam. 3 pictures you saw. And I said,
that's quite a few. I mean, it clogged up my WhatsApp for about half an hour anyway. The fact is that this is very difficult for you because you're going to the game at the weekend. Who do you like more?
Do you know what? You're so out of order. Honestly, I thought I'd got away.
He likes Keith more. He likes Keith more.
Because Keith drinks Guinness.
I thought I'd got away with the Charlton-Chelsea "Who do you want to win" game from last week. Look, I as I said in the group WhatsApp, which is what you've been alluding to. I work with Keith more than I work with Liam. But Liam was an incredible, I've said this before and I'll say it again, incredible human being. And they were both just brilliant analysts, brilliant pundits. And when, generally speaking, it was me plus Keith on a Friday, it was Prutz plus Liam on a Saturday. But when it came to the playoff semi-finals, obviously they came together and I worked with them and that's where the photos came from. Look, I want Chelsea to win. It's as simple as that. I love Keith to death. And we've had some great nights out. And we've shared more than a few Guinnesses together. And I would say at this moment in time, and listen, Brentford ain't going to finish 5th. But even if they finish top half, he's my manager of the season. I don't care what Mikel Arteta does, unless he wins maybe the quadruple. For Brentford's greatest ever manager to have gone. And then you've lost 3 of your star players. I said to him at the start of the season, if you finish 17th, you're right up there for manager of the season. And look where they are now. It is nothing short of sensational. He's doing a brilliant job.
Chelsea are going to have to be wary of the weapons that Brentford have because in Igor Thiago, they've got a striker that's getting better and better and better over the course of the season. They've got weapons from set pieces and long throws, which will cause Chelsea and did cause Chelsea an issue in the game at the GTEC Community Stadium. And Chelsea missed Cole Palmer, Liam Delap in midweek. Hopefully everyone will be fit by the time the weekend comes around. Liam ill. Palmer, they think, should be available at the weekend. And also Reece James too. But it's a huge match for Liam Rossigna because although he would have seen positives in that match, he can't really afford to start his Chelsea tenure with 2 back-to-back home defeats.
No, and particularly not in a League Cup semi-final against a big London rival and then a West London derby. I think the saving grace here for Chelsea is that it's at home. I'd be a lot more worried about them if it was the GTEC, Brentford don't travel particularly well. But you're right, they will score, Brentford. I don't see Chelsea keeping a clean sheet, so it could come down to a shootout. And I think actually it might be quite an entertaining game for Scott and I to watch.
Ah, you two going that together, are you, on Saturday afternoon? That'd be fun.
We won't
We'll
be
be there.
holding hands, Crookie, will we? But we'll be maybe having a pint
We
afterwards.
might have a debrief. We might have a
Yeah.
debrief afterwards.
Yeah.
Crook, who do you like more out of those two? The bloke who calls you Crookie, you slagged off all summer, or Liam Rosenior?
Yeah, I'm very much in the Keith Andrews camp at this moment in time. Nothing
Okay.
against Liam Rosenior, but yeah.
Of course you are.
Do you know what? Do you know what? It's like asking.
Because you jumped camps, obviously, but by the time we get to the end of Saturday, you might be in Liam's camp, depending on what happens.
He might be, but it's like asking who's your favourite kid. If you spend quality time with both, you fall in love with both of them. And one thing I would say is, I actually played with Liam when he came on trial at West Ham, and I played with his dad Leroy as well when he went on loan to Charlton. So not many people can say that.
Crikey, there you go. You played with both. Let's round things up by a look at what's happening in the transfer market. Donyell Marlon, is he really angling to leave Aston Villa?
I think he's in Italy today, as we're recording this podcast, to undergo his medical. I'm surprised by this one because obviously they've not signed too many players in the last couple of transfer windows. One can only assume they've got a replacement lined up, potentially Tammy Abraham, although with his injury record in recent years, I think that's a risk. But yeah, Marlon to Roma, loan deal initially, with the option of a permanent deal at the end of the season.
Who is the second highest scoring Englishman in Europe? Scott Minto.
No idea.
It's
He's gonna say
Tammy
Tammy
Abraham. Scoring goals for fun at Besiktas. Do you think that he can come and make an impact at Aston Villa?
Do I think that? Yeah, absolutely. Now you've told me that stat. Listen, I like Tammy. I thought he was that sort of breed of youngsters in the Chelsea academy that came through, did really well. When he went to Italy his first season, he was sensational, had some injuries. He's one of those, because he's such a relaxed, laid back type of guy. You always feel like he's got something more to come and more to give, but that's just him and who he is. But absolutely, he's scoring goals for fun, clearly at the moment. And I think he'd come back in. And it's nothing like coming back to England and feeling like you want to prove that you've come on from the player you once were as well. So just a slight little point to prove to everybody out there.
And also coming back to Aston Villa, where he had a successful loan spell in the Championship and did particularly well for them. So it'd be fascinating to see how he slots back into that environment. Mark Gay, what's happening with him in terms of transfer? Because the deal looks too expensive for him to go to Liverpool.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other takers that would like him, but would rather wait until the summer, where obviously they're not going to have to pay as much.
I think if he goes anywhere in this window, it'll be Manchester City. Obviously, they've got big issues defensively. John Stones, no idea, according to Pep Guardiola, when he's going to be back up to speed. They've got Joshko Guardiola, who probably will miss the rest of the season, if not all of it, then certainly the bulk of it. Diaz is injured as well, and they're in need of cover. They're in need of a top-class replacement. Gay would fit the bill. Again, it's not going to be a cheap deal to do. I think Palace's asking price is still north of £35 million. But as I say, if he goes anywhere this window, I think it'll be City. Keep an eye on Bayern Munich. They're sniffing for potentially a free transfer in the summer.
Interesting. Okay, we'll see what happens with that. You can follow it all on the talkSPORT website, talksport.com. There's lots of transfer activity there. Remember, we got live commentary at the weekend of Manchester United against Manchester City. We're around the grounds with Adrian straight after that. And then Sunday, Crookmeister and I will be live at Villa Park for Aston Villa against Everton. Wolves against Newcastle is just before that as well. We'll keep you updated from 1:30 on Sunday's Game Day Live. Scott Meister, you have good fun trying to decide which kid you like. And Crook, we'll see you over the weekend as well. Premier League All Access back Monday morning to review all the best of the weekend's action.